Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sam Hunter podcast. Today, we are honored to have Benny Overholt. This man killed the third biggest buck ever in Georgia, which is just incredible to think about. And the score that we're going to get more into this hunt story, but the score 236 and 1/8 inches in 2021. So this was really not that long ago, which is incredible. And we're going to dive into the whole hunt story. Before we even do, we're going to show something pretty cool today that came in. And funny enough, having Benny on, do you go by Ben or just Benny or kind of both?
Benny's good.
Benny, okay, perfect. Well, we actually have a company, funny enough, today called Ben Shot. And Ben Shot sent something pretty cool in. This is amazing. It's a whiskey glass, but it's got a 308 bullet. Um, in welded, I don't know if welded is the right word when it comes to glass, but I'm gonna say welded into the glass there. Um, I'll try to make it viewable for our viewers here, but it's got the buck that I took this year, uh, my name, the buck's name, and the date of the hunt. So the date it was taken. So pretty cool. If you guys haven't checked out Ben Shot, check them out. They've got some really cool things for hunters and anglers. They've got glasses that have you know, whatever caliber of bullet, but they also have broadheads for archery in the glass. Really, really neat. They have fishing lures, like there's different fishing lures in the glass. Um, they do a lot of sports stuff, hockey pucks, golf balls in the glass. Really, really cool company. And they're blowing up right now. You can check them out at Ben Shaw on Instagram. But there's one more look at it. They just sent this in today, which was perfect timing. Um, and I'm blown away by the quality of work they do. So check them out if you haven't seen them before. They do some really cool stuff. And like I said, I just thought that was cool that on the day that we're talking to you, Benny, it's been shot. So just pretty cool thing there.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get into your whole hunt for this amazing, amazing deer. But I do want to start with what got you into hunting in the first place. It's always where we start, no matter who we have on, what the deal is. Um, what got you into hunting in the beginning? When did you get started?
So yeah, I have a lot of history with the whitetail world. So not many people know it, but my grandfather was actually the one who first invented a grunt call before primos and them came along. And I kid with him today, if he would have patented it, well, we wouldn't be doing the occupation that we're doing today. And so I actually went to his house today and got his original. This is some of his old original grunt
Oh,
calls. And so if you the Henry grunt call, um,
that is so cool.
you can buy it. They have it at the local sports center here in Perry. So obviously he didn't patent them back in the day. But anyway, that being said, he was the founder of the whitetail world back in the day. Everybody looks up to him for what he done. He was a quiet old farmer that just didn't say a whole lot. All of his, all of his sons, my father. Yeah, it was just, man, it was something I grew up. As long as I can remember, I always dreamed of deer hunting. It was just, it's just been something that's been passed on through, from generation to generation. So it's incredible.
That is incredible. I'm not gonna lie, that just completely blew my mind because I was not expecting that. I did not know that piece of information. So this was your grandfather, and he came up with the first grunt call for deer hunting. Period.
That's right. Early 80s. So I would
Wow.
like he would say, he said there may have been another, there was no market of any call at that point. So if you look, I think Primos put out their first ones in 84. So he was in the process. He had some form, but just didn't patent them. So it was
Wow.
very interesting to know where that came from and how he took an interest in the whitetail world.
That is amazing. And that brings me to kind of takes me off into this whole other realm of things because that just blew my mind. But like when you were a kid, I mean, was this kind of going like I'm just trying to picture. Was it like you were a kid and he was coming up with this and you remember him doing this, or had he already done it by the time you kind of started to become conscious of the hunting world? Like, where was that time frame kind of at with you as a kid?
So he would have developed the call already, but 5, 6 years old, my family took on the job of actually doing a lot of the packaging for him. So I had my hands on the calls back, long, long time ago. So I blew a many a call over the years. Just being in with him and his interests and the different ones he had. It was very incredible experience.
That really is. I mean, you know, you hear about Duck Dynasty and everything that went into making those calls. I know they had a movie about it, which I saw when that came out, and this sounds like that, but with Bucks, so like the Buck Dynasty situation. So that is super cool, man. That just honestly that blew my mind. But and wow, and that's so cool that you brought the call and everything. And so now that even makes it even crazier. Like you to this point, and I was gonna kind of relate this to, you got into hunting when you first did. Could you ever have imagined that one day, and I mean, you got plenty of time left. So I mean, you may not be done. You may take a bigger one. You never know. But I mean, even at the point you're at right now, could you ever have imagined one day, like when you first started hunting, if somebody had said to you, Benny, one day you're going to take the third biggest buck that ever walked the soil of Georgia, what would you have said? What would you have thought to somebody that said that to you?
No, it's something you dream of. Like always as a kid, I dreamed of shooting a giant buck. And what did that feel like? I didn't know, but it's something you always dream of. But no, not to the extent of what this was. Super special deer. And I probably will never see anything close to him again or here in South Georgia like this.
Right. I mean, that's amazing. And before we get into the full like hunt story of what went down and all the details about this deer, um, did you, since your grandfather made this call, did you grow up? I mean, I would assume like packaging and everything. Did you call a lot? Did you rattle a lot? What was kind of your style and what your family kind of instilled in you from a young age? Because I know there's a lot of people that um, they do all kinds of like some it's hardcore rattling, some it's just calling, some it's mixing the calling and the rattling, some it's quiet unless it's a certain time of the year. So, I mean, everyone does it a different way, but like for you, what was kind of the routine?
Definitely. At one point I did rattle, but it didn't seem like in our setup, that wasn't what the success was. Definitely grunting is a part of it, but I'm more of a guy to pattern something. Just I love might say shooting a deer in his natural area. So acorn flats, to and from feed. I'm not necessarily I'm not saying I won't hunt over a corn pile, but it's not my liking. So patterning deer is probably where I just simply learning the whitetail world and it is just truly amazing. If you bow hunt, we bow hunt primarily everything. And so you learn so many sounds and communication levels of that whitetail world. Just absolute incredible. If you had a gun, boom, it's done. And nothing bad about gun hunting, but I have a high respect for these critters and the way they run around and communicate. And, man, always ears open, learn that sound. And so you can mimic or even, just understand that language. And so grunting definitely was I think as a whole, the family, our family hunting, we would have definitely stuck with the grunting side a little more.
That's incredible. And going into we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, but I kind of can't help it now. Um, when your grandfather made this call, so in this hunt for this deer, which we should just go ahead and address the elephant in the room because it literally is the size of an elephant behind you. But this 236 monster right behind you here. This is your buck. I mean, did you have a name for him by the way, or did you just kind
So
of
his name was Velvet because he stayed Velvet forever. I mean, that was his nickname was Velvet Deer.
Belvedere, I love it, and I can't wait to get to that because that is super interesting, and for all the, like, people out there interested in, like, just biology and science and the way this stuff all works, it really is a mind-blowing thing how that all how that all happened, but there he is behind you, Velvet, 236 inches of just pure monster.
Mhm.
Um, your grandfather made this call. I just have to ask because I know people are going to be wondering this. In the hunt for this deer, by any chance, were you using that call?
So no, primarily, I guess I should back up a little bit, and so this deer was, we knew something was definitely different with him, with being able, like he held it. He's actually what they call a cactus buck, with him holding his horns for he never shed that previous year, and so that's 2 years worth of growth. And so, I did not I felt like the previous year I had seen him just knowing where he bedded to and from, and he seemed like a lazier deer. The last 2 years, you never seen him really running does, and so I said this from day one that he basically acted like a big fat lazy doe. And that was
Gotcha.
what was, in the end, his testicles were messed up, and so that's what got him to this point.
Okay. Now that's really insightful because that was actually one of the questions I had, was about his, yeah, testicles and what was going on there. But before we even get to any of that, I really jumped ahead. But you mentioned even the previous year. Let's go back to, so this was 2021. You killed him. When did you first ever like know of this deer? Was it the year before, like when you were talking about, or was it years before that? When was the first time where you were like you were able to recognize him and tell this is that deer?
Yeah, so I actually have this is crazy. I actually have a shed of it back. So it would have been back in 19. This would have been his last shed, which is not, I mean, he's got a hole in the heart. He's just a little bit, he's crazy. So what stood out to him, he was on a different farm that we could hunt and they cleared the property. But when we would see him, he would hold velvet on that thing way into season. So nothing spectacular, but he was just weird. And so it was, we never really thought anything special. We were just like, he's freaky. We just didn't shoot him because he's freaky. Man, so I did have the previous year, in 20, I had him at 10 yards. I mean, like full draw. I said, nope, I'm not shooting him. His bases were big like pop cans. I never shot a velvet deer, but I looked at that deer. I said, he can be an absolute giant. Had him at 10 yards and we passed him. I got out of the stand, went home. I told my brothers, I said, y'all can shoot any deer on the farm. I want this deer next year. Like that was just, I had the first encounter with him and I said, next year, that's my deer. And basically told them to go hunt the farm.
I
So
like you caught him, and I mean you were the first one to have him there in shooting distance in 10 yards. That is tough to not take up that opportunity, especially with the bases that you were describing.
yeah,
If you had to guess, and I know it's exactly that. It's just a guess until you actually put a tape to it. But if you had to guess that year, what do you think he would have scored, or at least what realm would he have scored in?
nothing compared to what he does now. I mean, so with the trash he had on and stuff, he probably would have been about a 140, mid 140s. Just with and a lot of that came from mass measurement, so he really didn't look that great. I
Eh,
mean, he was a unique deer. So he put
Yeah,
on, I would have said, close to 100 inches in this last year.
that's incredible. And I got to tell you, I mean, there's a lot of people out there right now thinking, man, 140. I mean, there's a lot of people that haven't even shot a 140 in their life. And especially now we're talking in Georgia. And then on top of that, I mean, I took my best deer ever this year and it was a mid 150s deer. So I'm thinking, 140 something in velvet. You got him at 10 yards. You somehow had the willpower to be like, I'm not, there's something special about this deer. You had that feeling, like, I'm not going to take him. And you passed that up.
Mm.
Going from there, the rest of that season, did you ever have any more encounters like with him? Maybe you're just out there hunting to like, and I guess going from there, like, did you continue hunting that year or did you like maybe just kind of sat and wanted to see what was out there, or maybe you're like, I'm done, I'm gonna wait for him next year? Did your family members ever run into him and have to like go through that situation where they had to pass him?
Yeah, so I got to first off, I got to give a shout out to my family, my brothers, and also my neighbor. I just the key is good neighbors because my neighbor was able to kill him with a gun, had him in range, but we had this discussion and he agreed to let him go. So a big shout out to them guys. And honestly, I tell everybody this. I was the one in line to shoot a deer. It was my turn to shoot. We take turns with, the big deer. Not if he walks by anybody, anybody's gonna shoot, but go primarily hunt the area he's in, we take turns. And it was, so I feel blessed that I was able to kill him. And it was just neighbors, man. Good neighbors is how you grow big bucks.
That's incredible. And I just another side tangent from that, it makes me think about I have a lot of permission properties in certain areas. We do own some land out in Northwest Georgia. Um, Without saying too much, it does kind of border it's a big woods, and it borders really big woods and a major hunting club. And so I feel like the owner is a really nice guy. I mean, he's a super nice guy. We kind of work with each other in certain ways, but just having a hunting club, I think it'd be really hard if there was ever any kind of big deer to say, "Hey, none of none of y'all tell your members, don't touch him." I don't think he'd be like, "Yeah, that's cool. We'll just," so that's like, man, that's kinda out of the range of what I could deal with there. But, for your family, did you ever have a situation where you remember, like, one of your brothers or one of your like, somebody, like, hunting and, like, "I passed him today. I did it for you, man," or was it, like, maybe they saw him in the distance, anything like that?
No, different ones of my brothers they've had him fairly close range, but he kind of secluded himself to one side of the farm, which then I had by the end of the season, we knew where he was bedding. And it was like, just don't disturb it. Let's let him go. And, my thing was I wanted to go pick them sheds up, but it didn't happen because he never shed that year.
Right. So I was gonna jump into the pool hunt story, but I actually wanna hit on this first. Um, this whole not shedding thing, because this is crazy to me, but this deer, like you said, is maybe 140s, somewhere in there. Giant bases. He doesn't shed. Before we even get into any of this craziness here, like, what is your mindset when you're looking at cameras, or maybe you didn't have whatever it was, you saw him in person cameras, and you see that he didn't shed, and you're like, "Okay, that's weird. Maybe they're gonna drop this month. Maybe this," and it just never happens. Like, what are you thinking? What's going through your head? Did you reach out to anybody to ask about that, or did you just kinda like how did that whole process kinda work?
What had happened, I looking for him to shed, looking for him to shed. I wanted the sheds really bad. Well, that didn't happen. And it was from that point on that I noticed how he, just what had happened. He nipped down all his points. They just kind of chipped off. And then that towards the end of March, you could see new stuff just starting to erupt off of that. So it was by March of that year, I felt pretty sure he wasn't gonna drop it, and it felt when I seen the new growth come, I was like, "Man, he's gonna be something very special."
That's incredible. And, I was looking into this earlier, because I'm like, I don't think I'd heard of that before. I had heard of, and we're gonna get to this too, but, testicular injuries to bucks and how it can kind of blow them up sometimes. But I I had not heard of a deer just not shedding and then keeping it through the whole year and then kinda just building up from there. Um, and one of the things I looked at, and there were actually a couple, but one of them, which may be the route it was, I'm sure but was that testosterone didn't drop. And I guess that can go into any kinda injuries he has. So kinda elaborate from there, like, what was going on, did he you mentioned an injury, um, kinda elaborate on that.
So honestly, you couldn't see any injury on him. He had a sack, no, just nothing in him. So I reached out to a few biologists and stuff like, what do you think? And there was no definite answer, but possibly of some kind of insect bite at some point, was some suggestions. Nobody really seemed to have an answer, but I know he would chase does earlier on. He'd run around acting like he was interested in stuff, but I do feel the last 2 years he kind of went lazy, just
Mm.
kind of being he didn't have much interest, and I think that's what saved him from ruining his rack. He could just I mean, if putting more energy into growing his rack.
Right. So, and when you say that, that makes me think like that he got lazy. Um, I mean, do you think he was gonna? Did he not basically not seem, interested in the fighting anymore, going after does? He just kind of was existing and just there to eat and party and have a good time, but not like go after does and things like that.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, like he was just, and that's why I felt he was a route deer that we had to figure out towards the end of the year, knowing where he bedded, and then that whole game planning of how we kill him the next year was simply finding his feed and knowing what his routes were.
Man, so what? while he was in velvet, but then again with this weird situation. What month did you kill him?
I killed him the opening week of bow season, September
Okay.
13th.
So that matches up. I feel like with a deer like this, like, who knows what he was gonna do. Maybe he was still gonna, I guess, shed around the normal time and maybe from there do all the normal things, but I guess, it's hard to know, based on the weird things already gone on with his rack, but, um, considering this buck seemed kinda lazy, he just had this lack of testosterone, and being in a calling family, 'cause, I've done some calling, kind of have changed it up a little bit the last year where I didn't do as much in certain areas I was in, but then there's certain areas where I do more calling, and it depends on the time of the year. I've looked up a lot of videos on calling. I've really kind of become, over the years, a nerd on calling, like, and I know there's different, I mean, depending on the buck too. Obviously, if you know from trail camera pictures or personal encounters, it's a really aggressive buck, you might get really aggressive and rattle and grunt hard and all this kind of stuff, and there's also the feed calls, um, where, like, you're doing a doe just hanging out eating, and being that you're from a calling family and knowing how this buck was, did that change the way you called or you approached it? Um, were you not really calling much for this buck at all? Like, what was kinda your scenario there?
Yeah, so when I say we're a calling family, I feel like there's a time and place in the season of when that happens. But I am very much early season guy. It is strictly a pattern. Most of it's to and from bedding and just learning how the deer their travel routes. So no, there was actually no intent to even no attempt to call. And I didn't. Yeah, just trying to figure his routes out were a big thing.
Okay, and we're gonna get into this full hunt story and really your season, but before we do, I do want to flashback. I keep wanting to get ahead of myself because I think we all just can't wait to hear the story, but, um this buck, like, for him being such a monster, the growth and all this stuff, and he didn't drop, like, once you started getting those velvet picks in summer, let's go back to that, and let's go back even before that. Before this buck, what was the biggest buck you'd ever taken?
So I had killed a 147. Um, and then there was some other call bucks, just older bucks in the 130s, nothing big. My wife actually was in the top 10 and she was ahead of me. So I've had stuff hanging over my head for 10 years.
Oh, wow, well, hey, 147, I mean, that's an incredible buck, and especially in Georgia, but what was your wife's buck score that you're
Hers is
referring to?
154.
Okay, 154, that's a great
Yeah.
buck as well, and so, man, so yeah, and at this point, then your wife's got the biggest buck. And you go into the season, there's this weird situation going on. When you started to get those first, like, midsummer, like, where they're really starting to grow, those velvet picks, what went through your mind? Like, did you have a moment where you're just, like, texting your whole family? Like, I mean, did you jump around screaming? Like, when you saw that first pick where you just knew, "Oh, this is different. This is something special." Like, what was your reaction?
Oh, absolutely. It was just unbelievable to get a picture. It was just, you look at that picture and you're just like, is this real? But all of us, we're a close knit family, with business, everything. We run a dairy farm here. And so, like, we studied trail cam pictures. Everybody knew this is a special deer. And we didn't say a whole lot to many people. That was but I knew I needed to tell a few, or people would say, man, this deer comes from a pen, which they said it anyway. Just I knew a couple people, showed a few people, and just so people knew that he was around. But I did, man, he was so poachable, unbelievable. Like you would sweat bullets, when someone rode by on this dirt road. And it was a stressful summer because he was very out in the open. And if someone seen him, someone would want, if they're into that doing stuff like that, he would be mighty tempting to shoot for sure.
For sure, and I mean, going to what you said about the high fence thing, I can't even imagine because, well, opposite, I can't imagine only because a couple people I've interviewed recently, had some pretty big bucks, and they had a lot of that kinda flack thrown at them, and it just drives you crazy, especially when you do everything the right way, and you actually, it's like, I legitimately took a giant in my state. One of the guys, Colin, which, you may have seen, did you see his buck that he
Yes,
got here?
giant,
And he
absolute giant.
Yeah, and I mean, he had to deal with a lot of that, and I at the time I talked to him, he said he actually hadn't had to deal with too much of that, and I posted in some groups, just showing our conversation and stuff, and it blew up. Lots of comments, lots of positive, but also from that, so many comments of high fence. Oh, how much did that deer cost? And I mean, the list just went on. When he finally went on and looked at the comments, he texted me and he was like, Sam, I don't think I'm ever gonna go look at the comments again, man. He's like, I shouldn't have done that. He's like, I shouldn't have gone any looks because, and I mean, there was another, Tyler took a big Alabama buck, same thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just people are gonna do it. Um, and especially considering, I mean, we're seeing it, they're right behind you. That is such a unique and just crazy looking rack that, of course, everyone's gonna go there. I guess we're gonna sidetrack again because there's so many things to sidetrack about, but when you had to deal with that initially before we even get to the hunt, how did you kinda deal with that? I mean, you were hearing it, I'm sure, from everywhere. Did you just kinda let it, like, water off a duck's back, not an issue, or did it kinda get to you a little bit? I think that's a lot of people that have been on the podcast before, men and women, hunters, trappers, anglers, everything. We've had a lot of episodes about hate, especially when it comes to trapping and different things like that, and how different people deal with it. So how did you?
No, it was, there I felt like there was one other guy that had a good opportunity to kill him. And so it was, that added a little pressure to trying to make sure, and that's why, and, I did see him opening evening and he got by me. And it was just, and then that weekend, couple days there, knowing his pattern, and going towards the other guy's property, it was super that whole time. It was stressful. But, I kept saying, "Hey, it's just a deer. It's just a deer." But then, you know, you go back to the fact this deer does not happen, like it don't happen like this very often in Georgia. So it would put you would just try everything you had and just trying to, know what he's doing and just learn. And yeah, it was it was an incredible, incredible journey for sure.
Yeah, and let's go to that, first hunt, like you said, where you saw him. So you go through the summer. I can't imagine. I mean, I get so pumped up in the summer when I start seeing the velvet
Mhm.
bugs and just think, "Oh, he's a target. Okay, not quite there yet. Not quite. Oh, he's a target." And I just, man, I start making my list. I love summer for that reason. But you having this buck all summer long, you go finally get to all the anticipation building and it keeps growing and growing and growing. You get to that opening day. Kind of walk us through that. Did you go out in the morning? I know a lot of people, and I've kind of the last year stopped hunting mornings altogether in September, just going in the evenings. But with a buck like this, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if somebody could hold off. What did you do? Did you go out morning, evening, and how did that first hunt kind of unfold?
No, so the first morning I did not. I knew it had to be an evening stand with his pattern and stuff. It was set up for an evening hunt, and just he was very it was very dark when he came in, so that I just knew I caught a little glimpse of him. He made it by me at 35. It was getting pretty dark, but just that sick feeling of, "Hey, I'm in the area. It's a giant buck. Does he know I'm there? What all will he come back through? Did this mess him up?" A lot of them things going through your mind. You're like, "Man, what's the next hunt like?" Able to slip out, I felt like he was undisturbed. And so, yeah, it was that first hunt was, incredible to see him, but yeah, man, stressful, super stressful.
Yeah, and in that first evening, because 'cause I'm just trying to picture it, man, that first evening, like I said, it's getting later, you're in that last type, moment, and when he first comes out, first of all, had you seen any deer before him? Was he like a solo appearance? Did he follow some does in? But even outside of that, the moment you saw him, what went through your mind? Did you grab the bow? Did you just sit still and wait and start shaking? Were you pretty calm-headed? Like, what kinda unfolded from there?
When I so if there was I think there was one deer that night. I think it was one deer in front of him. But I was trying to focus on which one it was, and all of a sudden it was like, man, he's in the shooting lane, and it was just it happened so fast, no time to get worked up, and so it was. Yeah, I didn't. It wasn't like I just didn't have a chance. It wasn't like, man, I aired on my side, so it was just he was quick, he slipped through, and so we actually I knew then where he positioned, I had to make a move. I had to move a stand. So I actually based on that hunt, I went and moved a stand following Sunday. wind wasn't right, and then I went back in Monday to, with that newsstand set up.
Okay, perfect. So you go back into that new stand setup Monday and kinda just go from there. I'm assuming an evening again, but just kinda, um is this the hunt where you ended up getting him?
Yes.
Okay, so from there, you go in, new stand, maybe you're feeling a little bit of confidence from that, but, just kinda go from there. What came out first? There's so many things that can happen, like, um, I've had opening days where in daylight, I'm having raccoons come out. I'm like, what is this? Or you see a coyote and you're always tempted to shoot a coyote. But I've had plenty of situations where a coyote comes out and a lot of people would have let it fly and I didn't because there was a certain
Yeah.
buck I was after. And it may not have even messed it up, but just for the thought that he's right behind that, so what was your situation? What came out first and how did the evening kind of
Yeah, so the setup when we moved the ladder stand, I just moved it down about 45 yards in just a little bit deeper. And my whole reasoning for staying out from the first place was just to make sure I knew his travel route, but not affect him. And so I felt like it was time for me to be super aggressive. And I set up where I felt like he could come either side. And I knew going into that setup that it was a high possibility I was going to have to shoot him head on or quarter to me, simply because I was hunting his bedding area. He was coming from bedroom to feed. I was
okay.
hunting a lane on the thicket, so I had to kill him on that lane or catch him picking through his cut over pines coming to me. And so my thought was my first shot is a giant buck. First opportunity I have, I got to kill it. And I had changed my broadheads just to go fixed blade to punch a hole through him. I used to shoot mechanicals, but I had a high, I just felt like I was going to have to shoot him head on. And so, the previous year, I had pretty much nailed it down to where I figured he was in probably a 2 to 3 acre patch in this thicket. And so in my mind, I was playing that scenario of how he's going to come out. And you know how it is, them hunts, you're always just running scenarios. What if he's here? What if he's there? And man, it was early. I just, early, it was when I say early, hour before dark,
Oh yeah.
I glanced to my left and I'm expecting him slight right. The wind is borderline good for where I'm expecting him to come, but I look way to my left and I just catch the fuzz ball just and unbelievable. Like this is him.
Mhm.
And I looked at him, I just looked at him through binoculars to verify. I said, absolute, no question, giant. And I've had problems with getting too excited in previous hunts. And I was just like, Lord, if I am supposed to kill this deer, I don't want an opportunity if I can't kill it. I said, he is a beautiful deer. And I was just talking to myself. He's out there at 70 yards and I just catch glimpses, him and another buck coming through. And man, I was worked up, worked up. Finally, I just said, you know what? I got to quit looking at horns, focus on shot. And with him being in the thicket, I was able to move around a little, get my yardage, and my thought was, let's kill him in that thicket over there before he gets out and anything happens on this lane. And you know how big buck acts trying to cross a lane. And so I just remember when I ranged a few spots and he kind of worked his way back. And when he was coming to the hole, I had my rangefinder sitting here on the platform where you sit because I didn't have much cover. So the ladder stands facing the tree. And I pick up my rangefinder to hit that hole where I want to shoot him at, and my rangefinder's backwards. I'm shaking so bad.
Oh man.
Just
Yeah, I feel like that's something
like
that would happen to me,
at
but yeah.
that point, I was like, man, I about went in panic mode. Like, this ain't working.
Right.
And so I just said, I got, no range now. So I said, I got to take him on the lane because he shot through that hole.
Mm.
And so I'd ranged at like 38 yards where it was a twig up that was kind of rubbed up on the edge of the lane. And I was like, well, 38, that's what I'm going for. And I had the slide sights. I just remember, just as his head was coming out, I got full draw, and everything went a bow hunter's nightmare from that point forward. And what he never stops stride. He just turns and he angles straight, just basically straight to you. And I will never, as long as my sound mind, forget that walk of absolute. It looked like he was carrying the world on his head and just a heavy, heavy bob all the way down the lane. Just, I will never,
I was gonna ask, was he doing the, the bob where they, like, can't keep their head up?
it just absolutely looked like he was just weighing him down. He's just walking. And I know the distance is getting shorter, getting shorter. Finally, horns in the way to even shoot anything into the neck. It's just, it's nothing. I'm sitting there beating on him. Like, what do I do? What I do? And he finally at about, I think he was upper 20. I mean, he came in about 12 yards and he turns. And in my mind, I was like, I got to kill him as soon as he gives me a shot. And I bat at him. And I remember I'm beat it on him and I go, do I shoot in front of shoulder, in shoulder, or behind? And when I hit crease behind, I let it go. It was
Right.
my instinct. He's quartered
Right.
to me and
Order to
I
you.
shoot him in the crease. And that's when
Mm.
everything is a visual picture that haunted me for the entire night. So it looked like when I shot, he knew I bat at him. He knew something was there. And in my mind, when I shot, it looked like that arrow was behind the crease that far, plus quartering to me. So it's the worst,
Right.
absolute worst possible scenario. He stumbles, he whirls and stumbles, plunk, plunk,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, man, what's going on? He just hops off and walks, just walks, walks. I'm sitting there watching the dude walk and just take his time, take his time. Yeah, it's the worst
Yeah.
feeling a bow hunter can have.
That's just, I mean, the way you're telling it too is amazing because you can just visualize it. But, as you shoot him, and I know that's a tough situation because you're like, do I go through that bone of that shoulder? Because you know that, like, with a rifle or something, that kind of seems like where you'd probably go. But then
Yeah.
with a bow, you're kind of looking at, do I go behind it? And so I get the call you made. And then when he takes off, or not takes off, kind of like wanders off, is he going uphill, downhill, or just flat?
He's just walking flat, and
Okay.
I'm able he actually turns and comes into my pine row, and I can see him, this pine thicket triangle, so I'm looking down the row, and the last I see him, he's steady walking, just a slow, it would look like a gut shot walk, and I see him go out of the pines onto the lane on the other side into the hardwoods, and he disappears, and just
Ma
incredible, like, you don't know. It went from a high to an absolute, almost like I was angry at my shot. And I was like, Lord, what in the world? I prayed for a good shot and I just boo booed. And but at the same sense, I always dreamed of when you shoot a buck, you're super excited and just, your adrenaline's out the roof. But it was a set, I guess I totally over just a different reaction was it looked so big. It was like it was a very humbling experience to actually see a creature that big. Never dreamed of something that big. And I honestly I sat there in the stand for probably 5, 6 minutes, didn't call nobody, and just I was upset at my shot, but taking it in of actually what just happened of shooting this big deer, and it was, man, I just can't. Yeah, it was an incredible, absolute incredible experience.
That's unreal, and I love that you were, praying through the whole scenario from when he first comes in and even when it happened, like, you know, I I've been there. I feel like when I'm hunting, I've said before, I tell my wife all the time and some close friends, like, I feel like that's almost, for whatever reason, one of the places where I feel closest to God. When I'm hunting or fishing or something out in the outdoors where I'm doing this, but especially hunting. It's just it's something about it, and I'm constantly talking to God, and there's those highs like you said, and then there's those lows, and there have been times where I've been like, "God, why?" And just, agonized
Yeah.
about things, and even this year, that literally happened, and then the deer came right back, and I got him, and that was my best ever, and then it was just back on that high and just praising God, but it's just like the roller coasters you
Yeah.
go through. Um, but I mean, seeing this buck and praying through that scenario and having this monster come that whole way, and then the shot. So we go from there. You're taking that moment, and you're like, I'm sure you're just like, I don't know. But I'm sure it was plaguing your mind in one way that he kind of just walked off like not much had happened. I've been in similar where maybe not walked off, but like almost like a little trot where it's like I'm good, but then that deer died, but I thought that deer's fine. And considering the size of this deer and then that happening, before we
Mhm.
get to the recovery, because obviously he was right behind you. We know how the story ends, but it's just mind-boggling to hear it. And I honestly wonder, as we've been talking, I wonder if we're gonna have some viewers that are just like not hearing what we're saying because they're just like foaming at the mouth, looking behind you at this deer, just like not able to focus. But then again, with this story being the way it is, I don't think that's even possible. So when this happened, and even going to now, do you ever have moments before you get to the recovery? Do you have moments where you're going to bed? This might sound weird, but I do this all the time. Where you're going to bed and your mind just goes back to this moment, and you almost want to because for me, when I go to sleep at night, man, some of my best hunts, I like to just I almost take myself there. Like, I'll say my nightly prayers, do all this. I lay down, I shut my eyes, lights are off, and I purposely go to some of my favorite hunts and I just relive them. And I'll literally fall asleep doing that. And I've had some weird dreams because of that. I've said this on the podcast before. There was a dream where I was hunting this coyote and it was this monster coyote. And this is my wife and I still laugh about this to this day, but it is really weird and it creeped her out in the moment. I literally woke her up because like in my dream, I'm hunting the coyote, I'm putting off the shot, and I don't know why I started doing this, but I start howling loudly in my sleep. So I'm howling. My wife wakes up and be like, "What is going on with you?" But it's just like this is what. There's been so many nights where I put myself to sleep thinking about the hunts I've had. So for you, is this obviously it was an unsure situation in the moment, but now that you know, like obviously is right behind you, it turned out great. Do you go back to that purposely and go through that a lot?
But yeah, I definitely it's something you'll never forget is that experience. And like I said, probably to me is just that mental picture of him coming in and is that's what you dream of is seeing a giant buck and that walk in and everything that happened there. And then obviously the story finding them is something in itself, how all that went down and just replaying that. It absolutely you think of that story and celebrating that. It was an incredible time.
And just to make myself feel better, because I have you ever, woken up your wife like grunting like a deer, maybe high like a coyote in your sleep or anything like that?
I don't know if it was that bad, but yeah, I definitely dream about deer hunting for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I'm probably alone on that island, but, so let's go into this recovery. You get to see you're not sure about the shot. You're up there for, like you said, that whatever it is, 5 or 6 minutes, could have been long whatever it was, where you're just thinking through everything. What goes on from there?
Yeah, so my thought was before I call anybody, I'm gonna get down. I want to see an arrow. I want to see, just what the scenario was. And going back to my story, my setup was to punch two holes in that deer. And so getting down out of that stand, walking up, there is no arrow, there is no blood, there is only a scuff mark of where he about fell, and your heart just sinks. Like it's the worst feeling.
Mhm.
I just
No hair
remember
or
getting
anything?
what's that?
No, hair or anything like that?
It was very little. I mean, I knew I hit him.
Yeah,
It wasn't the doubt that I hit him. It was just more the fact of him being, where my placement and knowing his back.
right.
And so it was, yeah. From that point, I knew. I said, "Well, as bad as he, slow walk," I said, "I have to let this thing just let him lay for a number of hours." So I called my good friend. He owns a dog, tracking dog and stuff. I was like, "Hey." ran the scenario by him. What's your proposal? What did I need to do? He said, I'll be there. He said, I'll meet you at 2 o'clock, which is the middle of the night. We gave him a good 6, 7 hours to, he's like, if you got him in the gut, he will be down enough. Um, that he should be, we should be able to kill him if he's not. And so, yeah, we, we gave him that 2 o'clock. We all met, had my whole family and yeah, my personal family, my wife and kids, and had my brothers, and got my best hunting buddy down here and dog guy. It was, it was incredible. And, going into that story, he has a really good dog. So like you put a lot of faith in them and he knows what he's talking about. And we come down and I told him, I was like, here's where I killed him. And his dog runs past. It's like, no, that deer ran, to the right here. And he's like, well, this dog's not picking anything up. And so he called the dog back. Dog did the exact same thing. Just overlooked it, just wouldn't pick anything up. And I don't know if you ever get that feeling of just absolute sick, like almost a pass out hot sensation. I just remember going down on my knees and saying, Lord, like, if there's any possible way, give this dog a nose to go find that deer. And it was the third try. Brought the dog. I finally told him, I said, look, I know that deer walked this way. We'll go to where I seen that deer last, if all else fails. And that third time, the dog took it. And I was just watching on his GPS. And I said, well, he's definitely on track. And I think the first drop of blood we found was 40 yards in from the location. So it was not an exciting start to the blood track for sure. And with all your friends and with your family there, man, it was and they were getting worried. Everybody was, didn't have a great feeling on it. It was rough.
Right. The only reason I'm really able to put myself in that moment right now, as far as the tracking, is literally because of what happened this year. Because I've kind of had it where the tracker could tell me straight up, like, this isn't looking good, or he may
Yeah.
make it, that kind of thing, or like he's going to be dead right down there, and then he is. But this season, the best I've ever gotten, the tracker's first thought, and this was a different tracker, and he was great too. He was actually a buddy of the tracker I normally use, but the one I normally use, if I remember right, had been up till 3 or 4 a.m., like tracking a different deer hours away in Georgia the previous day or night or whatever it was. And so he wasn't available. And he recommended a buddy to me. And so I'd never worked with him before. He was a great guy, great tracker. But when he came, he saw that there was some hair and there was no blood.
Mhm.
And, like I showed with the glass, it was with the 308, and so it was a 308 bullet, and it was at about 8 yards. So granted, it blew right through him. There was no blood, and the tracker was like, "You shot this deer at 8 yards with a 308," and so there was some hair, and it wasn't even the hair wasn't even looking good. He's like, "This doesn't look. I don't think we're gonna find this deer." And so right off, my hopes are just crushed. I had a buddy there though who was like, he had some faith, and I guess he had a similar situation in the past where it's seen that kind of thing. It's like, I think you can still find them. But the tracker was like, "This doesn't look good." Long story short, my buddy actually found blood before the tracker got there. And again, it was similar. I guess it was 40 yards up. But then it was pouring rain. It started washed away right in front of our eyes. Just a terrible situation. By the time the dog got there, it had washed away a lot of the blood. We went in a circle, and then the dog reset. But before the dog reset, I remember thinking right then, and like you said, I was praying the whole time in my mind. Like, the tracker's telling me this doesn't look good, this and that. And I just immediately start like praying, like, God, please, please don't let this happen. I'm freaking out. I'm pleading with God, like, to let this happen. But as soon as the dog went to a creek and looked across as if the deer, I mean, when I saw him look across the way he did, I thought the deer went across that, and it had been raining that day, so the creek was raging, and I'm like, that deer is buried down there, flowed down the river, or creek, but it looked like a river at that point, or somehow got across. We're never gonna find him. But he's like, well, let's take him back up to where we had last blood and let him reset. That dog reset, but at that time, I remember my brain was already done. Like, even though I'd been praying, I think just it messed me up to see that, and see the dog look across the creek like that, and him kind of like, well, let's let him reset. And I just feel like it's over. And I'm just like, God, why? And we go back up to the last blood. dog resets. I'm just like, got my head down. And I'm just, and the tracker seconds later is like, "Hey, buddy." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Buddy." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm looking at your deer." I'm like, "No, you're not. No, you're not." And right, the dog's got him. And so sometimes, man, it's crazy when those dogs reset, like you feel like it's over and then the dog resets.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happens, man, but like, so going to yours, this dog resets third time and then he picks it up and go from there.
Yeah, and we watched him go, and I told him we just let the dog do its work, and when we came out in that pine road to where it hit the hardwoods, I remember I came out on the lane and shone down the lane, and I seen something really shiny down there, and I was like, "Man, what the world?" Like, it reflected. And we were finding some blood, not just a great lot. And so I walked down there and I'm picking up this piece that's reflecting. And here it is my bra head is broke and the blades are laying in the middle lane. Like, how does this happen? Like,
Uh,
I shot a fixed blade bra head that should have just cleanly
mhm.
went through. And here I've got a bra head that's broke. So in my mind, like, okay, what malfunction? What in the world is going on? I'm sitting there looking at this piece when the dog guy says, "Hey, my dog is treed." And he shines to the right, and it's just a blood mat where he had when he got to that lane, he turns to the side and walks 20 yards and falls over in there. So literally that deer only walked 20 to 25 yards out of my sight and died. Absolute incredible. From an all-time low, seeing your bra head laying in the floor to that deer being dead 25 yards from there was just, man, the woods came alive. I'll say that, to actually, it was
Man,
incredible. But just the whole thing of that dog being able to track that from an all-time low to an all-time high was absolutely incredible. It was a lot of hooting and hollering for sure when we actually put our hands on it. It was just unbelievable.
that really is. And this is one of the coolest hunt stories I've ever heard, honestly. And I gotta ask, leading up to this point and what you'd seen over the summer, velvet, lots of trail cam pictures, all that kind of stuff, seeing him in person before, although, it was, like I said, this hunt, when you're seeing him, it's an hour before last light, like you said, so it's like you can see him good, but did you have any idea? I mean, obviously you knew you just shot a big, like a monster buck. You knew that. Anyone would know that. But did you have an idea what you had just done? Like, did you think, "Hey, this could be the state record. This could be closing in on it. We might be getting close." Like, where was and not that it's even about that, but just on the side, like, did you kind of have that in the back of your mind?
No, not that he was any kind of state record or anything like that. I knew he was a giant deer, and through this whole process, the different people that say it said automatically he should easily be over 200, and that was my main goal. I was like, it would be really cool if he's a 200-inch deer,
Right.
but it was no way of like we didn't know what he had on him until you grabbed his rack. So it was yeah,
And I gotta
unbelievable.
ask, 'cause that's always one of my favorite parts. What was that moment like when you found
And
them, but you get behind this deer, you put your hands on that rack, and you're taking the pictures, you got him in your hands and all the hard work that's come down to that moment, and he's right there, he's in your hands. You're like, how did that feel for you?
honestly, I didn't deserve it. I mean, just I felt undeserving to like it could have been just well one of my brothers. Big shout out to them, like their support and like this caliber of deer can ruin families, but I say we killed it as a team and not as an individual. And it was absolutely incredible to experience it with my kids, my wife, my kids, my best hunting buddy, and my brothers. It was just, man, it was a time we won't ever forget for sure.
That is unbelievable. And, I gotta ask, I already think I know the answer, but we just gotta go there. So I'm assuming the deer behind you is the actual original mount. Is that correct, or is this a replica or the original
No,
original?
it is.
Which brings me to my next question. Did you being that you're that high up there in the I mean, third biggest deer ever to walk the soil of Georgia, at least taken and recorded. Like, did you have people ever approach you? I mean, looking at this book right now, and everyone seeing it can agree with me. If you've ever been in a Bass Pro shop out there, you already know what I'm talking about. That's the kind of buck you see in Bass Pro all along the wall, and better than a lot of them, to be honest. So, did you have like Bass Pro Cabela's, different antler collectors? Were people coming at you, offering you? Did you get any offers on this buck? And like, hey, I'll throw in a replica or things like that.
So the problem with this deer, it is super hard to replicate a velvet deer.
Mm.
So it is almost impossible to do to make him look. I've heard that comment throughout, taxidermists and stuff like that. So it's almost impossible to get a replica of him that looks. I mean, you can kind of try to form it up, but with him being full velvet, yeah, it is super tough. But yeah, he did make the cover of a couple magazines. And so, yeah, it was an incredible, one journey that I took with this was he was in the top 10 of his, I mean, the top 3 of his caliber. And I was able to take him to the Pope and Young convention in Reno, Nevada. And he was one of the, 3 biggest whitetail killed in that 2-year bracket in his division, like a non-typical velvet. And so I got to go out there with, I felt like a little peon with the big wheels out there and got to meet some of my childhood guys I looked up to, Chuck Adams, Remy Warren, and some of those. It
Oh,
was
that's awesome.
just absolute incredible experience to be able to go out there and go to the Pope and Young convention and represent South Georgia. I don't know how many people made that remark. You're from South Georgia and y'all got deer down there like this. And so it was just an incredible experience all the way through. Um, I just, going back, I gotta add this to the story of how blessed I am that he's not ruined, the highs and low. What initially happened with that shot was he had to spin and it made it look like I hit back further. So I actually done a fairly good shot, but it went through, came out gut pocket and lodged in the back leg, broke the back leg completely, which actually saved me 100%. Had I heart shot him, it's hard telling what that rack looked like running through brush. And because he was soft, spongy, it
Mm.
was
Oh, wow.
it was the best scenario to put the deer down to save his rack. So I related this story different times, and I feel like God took me through highs and lows, and in the end, he protected this deer, and that deer died upright, did not scratch an antler. I mean, just incredible. I felt like the Lord had his hand in every step of the way. Take me through the highs and lows of this whole thing. And through this whole story, that's been my goal. Is like the Lord blessed me with this, and I want to give Him the honor and the glory for what happened. And He's been good to us, and I felt like that whole story. It was a journey, and he blessed me in the end with the way this story played out. It was just incredible.
I love that. I love that, and I love you're giving, the glory to God because for sure that is a God moment for him to allow it to be that exact scenario where I mean, I didn't even think of that, like you're saying it was spongy and it kind of ended with the velvet, like, that makes sense, but to allow it to be the perfect scenario, and even in that split moment where you're thinking, like, "Do I go into the shoulder? Do I go" and you just have to make that and you've been praying this whole time, but, like, you just kinda have to go instinctively with from what you've been praying and what you're feeling in the moment, and then it ends up being the perfect situation. That's one of those wow, like chills, God moments right there. Um, and that's amazing. And I do got a flashback to when you said you went to out and Remy and people were there. What did Remy say? Do you remember? Did he have any like anything
So
specific?
he had a lot of seminars going on and stuff. But yeah, I would have spent more time with Chuck Adams and stuff, and like he autographed books and different things. So I told him about Granddad's story. So he sent books home, autographed books home for Granddad, and Granddad got, it was just incredible. Chuck was really nice to us. And, yeah, it's just a dream, man. You just couldn't dream it up to be able to travel like that and get out there and just, man, incredible, incredible animals it was 130 species, all of Pope and Young species there. So whitetail to everything that's Pope and Young scoreable, and man, incredible experience.
Man, and I gotta say, considering all that, is there any chance, it hasn't been that long, and I know when I reached out to you, you were super humble, and you're like, "Well, I feel like my story is already old news and all that," but I feel like this kinda story, man, when you're, like, top 3 in the state, it's never gonna be old news. I feel like this is one of those it becomes legend, at that point, so I love that. I love that you're humble about it. But is there any chance this buck is gonna make an appearance? I understand if not too, because at this point, you're probably like, I gotta keep that thing, look at nothing happening to it, but, there's different things in Georgia here, Buckarama, things like have you taken it there? Is it possibly gonna make an appearance at the next Buckarama and some events like that, or what's kinda your take on that?
So at this point, not a whole lot. Obviously, he was at the show early on in 21. And so, yeah, that's basically on the show he got. But like I said, he went on the front of the Rack magazine. GOM put him on, so he did have a few stories displayed. So it was incredible to have, just not because of who I am, but I think like even credits to him, what he grew and the incredible creature that deer was. Like just he was a good representation of Georgia. But freaking, I say this, it's a freaking nature, and I was
Right.
blessed to be able to harvest the freaking nature.
Right, and, before we close out with, your future goals and endeavors and how you kinda take on deer hunting now that you've hit this absolute high, and again, with the way things are going and the way, there's a lot more people these days letting them walk, but again, you just never know, but it could happen again, but you just never know what the future holds. But before we even get there, what do you think about considering your grandfather came up with this first buck call, your family is very cemented in, like, this whole deer hunting, thing, like, how does this all kinda fit into the legacy of even thinking about your grandfather, your family? I mean, that had to be a cool moment when it finally hits you like, "Man, my grandfather made the first buck call, and here I am with, like, the 3rd biggest buck ever killed in Georgia." Like, how did that all kinda, you know how does that make you feel, and how does that kinda play into, your family's legacy when it comes to deer hunting?
Yeah, so I I just feel incredibly blessed to have that inheritance and be taught and to fact is, I shared, I was telling granddad I'm gonna do this podcast this evening and just asking him, a lot of his history. And he told me, he said, I remember the day driving from your house to my farm and seeing the first deer track. And, getting out of he said, I stopped my combine to go look at the first deer track. And, we take a lot of them times for granted where we are today. And I guess my goal is, I want to hand it to my kids. And that's really what's changed since I've killed this deer is just like helping my kids. And I've got 4 boys. They all shoot deer. My wife loves to hunt, my family, just and even my respects to granddad right now. He's 92 and he is I think he killed 10 deer this year. I mean, he's a killer.
Man.
So
That's amazing. That's so cool. And, I was gonna ask you because it's just now hitting me from what you're saying. I didn't realize that's so awesome that he's still with us and that he got
um,
to experience this deer. I didn't that's incredible. I mean, what was his reaction when you're like, "Hey, granddad, look at that," and you're holding up a 236-inch deer? Like, how did he take that?
I think some of his first remarks were something like he said, "You're spoiled" or something like that. Like he's been in the industry for so long and like he's never killed
Right,
anything like that. But he was
right,
super supportive, and that's my goal now is to give back to him. Like he taught me so much. I told him, I said, "Man, this year's been incredible." We actually almost lost him in COVID back in 22. I mean, unbelievable. He's around.
right.
And I just remember on his deathbed, I mean, we thought he was leaving us. I told him, I said, "Granddad, you got to come back. I got a special deer for you." And we let him come back, shoot the biggest deer on the farm. That one scored 157. And then this year, he kills a 153 and a super nice double beam buck that I'm not sure what's going to, we'll have it stored here at the GON event. That definitely into the 160s, pretty solid. And so, I it's just, man, it's a blessing to try to give back and help him, for all he's done for us as a family and just
Right.
getting us into it's just a little bit something we can repay in his older age. Helping him retrieve this deer is just a super good. This is super, it's a lot of fun. We're very blessed.
Yeah, that is unbelievable, and, I hope that he ends up on the cover of one of these, like a GON magazine or something like that with one of those bucks in one of these future, issues. It sounds like what I wanna close with is, what is your goal for the future of your hunting career and life? And that can play into yourself and like you said, you have your own kids, your kids. This sounds like your grandfather's a big part of that right now, like, getting him on some good deer and letting him reap some of the benefits and rewards of all the hard work he's put in over the years, so obviously he plays into that. And then for yourself and your kids too. And also like considering you're trying to help your granddad out, I'm sure like I'm getting to the point now where like my kids are getting a little bit older and I'm starting to want to put them on some deer and but there's always that internal like, man, I want to go after the biggest deer I can get too. So how does that kind of play into you, especially having taken this and having a granddad you're trying to get on him, like kids you're trying to get on him, your wife, like all that, and still like, where do I fit into this and my goals? Like, where are you at on all?
Yeah. Well, I look at it this way. I mean, I feel super blessed in that, and my I would just as soon see someone be able to accomplish something and just, some people say, "Well, oh, you done killed a big buck," and like, you think you kill anything? Like, why would you kill anything under it? Let me tell you something. It's still a thrill to go out there and shoot the biggest buck, and but even to me, it's just seeing my kids thrive, and like, there's nothing rather more that I'd rather see them do than to go out and hunt, be successful. My oldest kid videoed, he had a video shot of 139 and 6/8 7 point this year. Cool,
That's
but
amazing.
just them,
Yeah.
man, that just blesses me when they take interest, and so my goal is, yeah, I'd love to kill another one, but I feel like I've had my turn. And so just, man, the whitetail world can bring you close together, or you can
Mhm.
have enemies. It's just plain and simple. And we choose to make it a lifestyle, enjoy it, and celebrate everybody's successes. And it's just, man, there's nothing like a text or a message. Hey, I just shot or shoot a buck. And that experience, that feeling never gets old.
Yeah. I love how you put that too, because it's like I've never caught a 15-pound bass, but if I did tomorrow or this spring, then the next spring, if there's a 10-pound bass, I'm not gonna be like, "I'm not casting at that. I already caught a 15. I'm gonna let the 10 go." I'm gonna go for the 10 because, man, it's that thrill and that feeling right then and there. And same thing with you. I'm sure if you're out hunting for yourself and a 180, 190 comes up in Georgia again, and yeah, you've shot a 236, but I don't think you're gonna let that 190 pass and just say, "I've been there and done that." It's still that incredible moment, in the moment. So I love that. Benny, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Thank you for showing off this incredible deer because I think that it's something that everyone should see. I mean, in Georgia or not, like around the world, if you love deer hunting, this is the kind of bucks people aspire to and people dream about. And I just appreciate you being on the show, having your buck up there for people to see and kind of live that experience that you got to live just a few short years ago. So thank you so much.
I can zoom him up if you want. If you just a little
Sure,
bit
yeah.
of a
Yeah.
kind of give you 11-inch bases is what he's mass is where it's at.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so he's just he's
man.
ugly. 39, I mean 38 scoreable, 19 and 19 on either side.
Man,
So
that right draw, that thick, like, club he's got down there is just unbelievable.
well, that's the joke. That's the running joke. That's his testicles
Oh, there
hanging
we go. Okay.
hanging up here because he didn't have any there. So
Yeah.
I set that
Man,
back down.
wow.
So
Well, that's incredible. Benny, thank you again so much, and, we wish you and your family, all the future blessings and success and deer hunting and, just that it continues and great job, and we look forward to seeing what you guys do in the future, but, thank you again so much for being on the show.
yes, sir, and thank you for your time that you took in doing this.
Absolutely. Have a blessed season next season, and thank you again.
Same to you.